Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Bosch from the Two Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me is the wizard himself, Mr. Trumpmania, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
I was doing great. Just prior to recording, we got the news of the passing of the great Terry Funk. So condolences to the Funk family, to friends, and any colleagues across the wrestling universe, like many others. Certainly, one of my all-time favorites. Like if you were on a desert island and you couldn't watch anything else, right? Like certainly Terry Funk would be one of those guys like to choose his matches. I jumped in like discovering the NWA like during that Flair feud with the plastic bag, which like as a 9-year-old it's like whoa, and then passing through USWA, WCW, ECW, WCW, Chainsaw Charlie, which was a surprise. I didn't know who it was like for the first couple
Yes.
of weeks. Just an amazing performer, and from everything we've heard, somebody that gave back so much and just wanted to help others. And from a business perspective, what do they call that? A futurist. Everyone always talks about that Funk was the one who knew early on that the territory system would die and that it would be dominated by one or two national wrestling promotions before the WWF went national.
And to me, I love Funk, one of my all-time favorites. Loved all of his merch, all the Texas Bronco stuff, all the gear. I mean, just the Funk U stuff. I mean, so much good, like ahead of his time, marketing and merchandising stuff. But I am obsessed with like the feud. So, like, okay, an awesome feud with Jerry Lawler, he had an awesome feud with Hogan, he had an awesome feud with Flair. He had a little bit of a feud with Bret Hart, which was a great match, obviously, for his WrestleFest 50 years of Funk. I mean, just one of those things had awesome matches with Ricky Steamboat. It's like, man, this guy could have a good match with anybody, and of all shapes. I mean, Hogan wrestles completely different than a Flair. Brett wrestles different from Lawler, and he's able to have awesome matches with everybody. So, fun. And then Shane Douglas, he's having awesome matches. Cactus Jack, McFoley. I mean, then Chainsaw Charlie and Foley are having crazy matches. So to me, Funk, one of the all-time greats. Just absolutely love him. If you want to see like the perfect pro wrestler, you got to throw his hat in the mix. He might be because he could do it all. He could do comedy, he could do serious, he could do chain wrestling, he could do brawling, he could do like legit blood feuds. Uh, his feud, obviously, with Dusty Rhodes is off the chart. So I got to put Funk up there. If you don't want to say Mount Rushmore, if you want to say one of the goats, he's got to be up there. He's got to be at least be considered.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you're building, a team, right? Like in sports, you need players that are utility is like dimming it too much, but people that can really do everything. And Terry Funk was that, and just like so many amazing points. Like you can know him for just one or two things, and then you come across his stuff in Japan when the ring is exploding. It's just amazing. And then you see the clips when he was retiring. What was it, 82, 83, and just knew how to work the audience and see the Japanese audience like go crazy for his entrance with his brother.
And if you look at it too, it's like that's another run. So he had the NWA championship run in the mid 70s. Then again, he goes to All Japan, or basically in the early 80s there, and him and his brother are dominating with Hanson and Brody. I mean, there's so many different incarnations of him and just succeeding basically for like 6 decades in the wrestling business. Just absolutely amazing career, and what a run.
Yeah, and it's funny. Before I was a wrestling fan, I had gotten I don't know if it was a birthday present or it was just like discounted at Toys R Us. I had the Terry Funk LJN doll, so it's in kind of rough shape. I don't know if the dog ate it or I ate it or something like that, but it's still around, and it still reminds me. And then later, when I learned who Terry Funk was, it was even cooler.
Nice, love that. But of course, R.I.P. Terry Funk, one of the all-time greats. There's no doubt about it. As we move into the news and the news cycle, we've got a lot to cover here. What about Billy Corgan and the NWA?
So a really, I guess, unexpected week or few days for the NWA as we record this, and not too far away from, I believe, their 75th anniversary show. Billy Corgan is the one who typically gets the press when they want to put a spotlight on the NWA, understandably, given his celebrity. But said some really interesting things, said some other things that seem off. Then Tyrus was noted for saying some things, and then things really were blown out of the water. So let's do this one step at a time. The first statement from Billy Corgan, I very much affirm, which is, look at WoW. Doesn't get a lot of love from wrestling media, but WoW is very credible and draws on national television to incredible ratings, giving people work and entertaining fans we don't know out there because they don't fit into the normal bucket. What I'm saying is, wrestling does a poor job at times as a culture of looking past the obvious gossip, realizing there are the impacts, WOWs, and NWAs, building a business that is necessary for the ecosystem of the entire business, plus giving opportunity. So I think that's a great point. Like, people often forget, especially about WoW and Impact. I'm not sure the NWA really fits there right now, although there are some people that are utilizing it for a full-time job. So that is a great opportunity. What else? It was not the core of my decision to put the title on him, Tyrus, strictly because of the marketing of that title on television, on Fox News. He did that on his own. He asked for permission, but he did it on his own. I think he says a lot about the NWA and how I want to run the company, which is, we're going to do it our own way. It's not for everybody, but you're talking to a guy who runs his band the same way. It's worked out on that end just fine. Do you know how many times I've been pronounced dead on the mat in my career? I understand what it feels like to take the heat, but I don't think the heat is bad for wrestling. I'm not into this patty cake version of wrestling. So what's interesting about that is, obviously he's a very successful musician and overseeing the Smashing Pumpkins brand, which can draw tens of thousands of people, as we see at festivals overseas and so on. But it isn't necessarily always translate to wrestling. It doesn't mean, since he kept one brand around, that that it will translate for wrestling. Look, what was it? Jim Herd had come from successfully managing Pizza Hut, and it didn't
Yep.
work out so well in WCW. Although, some of the branding things, like on WCW Saturday Night, maybe were ahead of their time or something like that. But he has to take a hard look at what the NWA is.
And with Tyrus, obviously, being to be the champion, it's one thing, but are they making money? Are they worth more money now than they were?
I wouldn't think so, and I saw this quoted in an article, and I really have to go back to Corgan's interview with Chris Van Vliet from the source directly. But in this article, it said the 56-year-olds, meaning Corgan, has brought the company's value from 20.9 million in 2019 to 34.8 million in 2023. Corgan said he's trying to find the right business models with parties that have agreed to work with him. So I don't know where those numbers come from. It doesn't make sense to me, but and I think the maybe before this week the value has increased. I think a lot was done for the brand, which has struggled at various times most of the last 30 years. But just to get to Tyrus, and I think the most impactful thing about the week, unfortunately, is that on Fox News, apparently, Tyrus promised to assault his children if they share their preferred pronouns. So I think everyone has the right to their own politics, but I think people were upset, saying that he'll basically abuse his children if one comes home and says, I identify as a they, them, or something like that, which is really dangerous because a lot of people follow celebrities on television. And sometimes if one person, commits violence on their child because of Tyrus's words, then that's terrible, and that's really on him. So a couple effects of that. I mean, you could see it was Media Matters had brought this to light, and then hundreds of people were retweeting this and cursing him out and tagging Corgan and so on. So diminishing a brand that's already struggling. Dan the Dad from Glory Pro said that NWA had asked them to help promote, and that's why that they're not involved. And potentially related or unrelated, I don't know, Mae Valentine, their backstage interviewer and former playmate, and really somebody that has gotten the company mainstream attention, really stands through in a different, stands out in a different way, that she said she's done with the NWA. I don't know if that's related at this point, but that's something to note.
Interesting. And a special guest joining us right now, the owner of OVW, Mr. Matt Jones, returning to the show. Matt, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you fellas? Sorry, I was thinking we were on Central Time and it was Eastern Time, and I screwed up. My fault. But glad to be with you late.
Hey, no problem at all. You guys had some huge news going on with Netflix. How did this happen? What's the latest on the premiering Netflix documentary or docu-series, I guess you could say?
Well, so they were with us. So for people who don't know, starting on September 13th, Netflix is airing a documentary that is basically behind the scenes of OVW for about 4 months last summer. This has been a long process. It was tough because we were supposed to keep it quiet. I know it got reported a little bit in the wrestling media, but we basically were approached a couple of years ago. We talked with them, talked with the BBC about it, and then the director of Last Chance U and Cheer came on board to direct it, and they followed us for 4 months as we did our summer tour around the region. And I think it's going to be a pretty amazing. I mean, I haven't seen it because I'm in it, so they won't let me watch it until it comes out. But I think it's going to be pretty amazing. I think people are going to see a side of backstage wrestling that if you're not in the business, they've never seen before. And I think it's going to be really unique, and I think has a chance to be really great for wrestling and certainly for OVW.
It's pretty cool when Netflix, one of the biggest, obviously probably the biggest streaming company, but one of the biggest companies in the world right now, is posting, little trailer, a little picture, says the best wrestling in America happens right here, and they're saying the alumni in OVW includes Brock Lesnar, The Miz, Cena, Batista, Orton. Now it's time to see inside Kentucky's iconic Ohio Valley Wrestling Gym, and it premieres. Wrestlers premieres September 13th. I mean, that got to be a pretty cool feeling, knowing like, man, this is it's my company, and oh yeah, Netflix is doing a documentary and promoting us to the moon. I mean, pretty cool.
Well, it's an awesome platform. I mean, look, they'll get into a lot of this on the show, but the history of OVW since the WWE's involvement has been rocky, to say the least. But I think that's why they're interested. I saw a lot of feedback online from the wrestling, I call them the wrestling nerds, that are, were upset that well, first of all, upset I'm the one that said the line that it's the best besides WWE and AEW. I actually believe that. But even if you don't, a lot of the people being upset, I don't think they get it. I mean, I don't think they understand. Netflix is not doing this show because they care about what star of matches we put on at OVW. They're doing this for the same reason they did Last Chance U. I mean, they did Last Chance U at a college that was a small college in Mississippi. They didn't go to Alabama, right? They went to a small school in Mississippi. It's a very similar thing to this. I mean, they want to show wrestling at the grassroots level. And the reality is for WWE, AEW, and maybe even things like Impact, NWA, they're not going to show you the behind the scenes drama because they have, they have interest in not letting the world know all the things that happen. I just decided when they approached me, let's do it. Let's just let them see what it's actually like to be a wrestler. This is the kind of thing that I think's only existed in wrestling a couple times. I mean, there was the documentary Beyond the Mat that, of course, showed what happened with the Montreal show. And but there hasn't been much where a company said, you have access to everything. You're going to see us fighting. You're going to see me and Al Snow arguing. You're going to see the wrestlers getting into it with each other. You're going to see their regular lives. And I think even the hardest core wrestling fan is going to be surprised what they see. And I think they're going to enjoy it because I don't think anyone has ever done this before.
Very, very cool. So how does it come about though? Like, how do they approach you? Like, who approaches you? How did
Well,
this actually happen?
I went to the BBC. So a couple years ago, I was trying to think, all right, look, independent wrestling is now huge and we're having a hard time finding a niche. And I come from the sports media world. And, you know, I think promotion, I was thinking, what could I do promotional wise that's different than what everybody else does? And I thought, you know, I don't think I've ever seen a show behind the scenes of a wrestling company, like really behind the scenes. And so I went to BBC, pitched the idea. They said they wanted to do it. In order to do it, I had to agree to give up all control and basically say, you all do whatever you want. I pitched it as Last Chance U, but wrestling. They ended up asking the director of Last Chance U. He came and spent a couple weeks with us. He knew nothing about wrestling, even what it was. And he was in. And so the hard part was, even though it was my idea, I had to give up control. And I had to basically say, you all get to do whatever you want. But I thought it was worth the risk. And the good thing was Al Snow, because of his Tough Enough days, he understood what that could do and what that sort of world outside of wrestling, focusing in on wrestling, how that could be positive. And so he was on board and we decided to let it happen. And our wrestlers, our talent has been great about being open and into it. And they open their lives to these people. And I think you'll see that.
What else should we expect from the show? Because I know we're thinking like, you know, maybe some of the stuff we've seen WWE backstage, but it's a little bit more canned. You could tell maybe it's a little bit scripted from some of the
It's
stuff.
all canned. And that WWE doesn't show anything they don't want people to see, right? Like, I mean, they're
Right,
not.
right.
I have zero control over what's on that tape or what's on the
Wow.
show. Right? So I think there's going to be a lot of people who in the wrestling world are going to wonder how much of it is script. None of it's script. I mean, I have no idea what it's going to show. To give you an example, I have a seizure during one of our board meetings and they're going to show it. And I've never seen myself have a seizure before. And I'm going to see it for the first time when it's on Netflix.
Wow.
So,
damn. That's crazy. Holy moly.
So I think what you're going to see, I mean, look, wrestlers on this level have very unique lives. So you're going to see, I mean, I've got one wrestler that's a school teacher during the day, it's a wrestler at night. Another one's a chicken farmer during the day, wrestler at night. We've got some people who are very young trying to break into the business. We've got Jesse Goddard's Mr. Spectacular, who was once high up in Impact and is now doing this. Ryan Howe was on Tough Enough, and now he's doing this. Cash Flow's been an independent wrestler for 20 years, still trying to kind of break through. You're going to see me and Al having disagreements about how to make money. Al has sort of an old school wrestling view. I'm trying to do kind of new school marketing. And all of those things, which are real conflicts that exist really in life, now you're going to see with the camera. And I think people in the wrestling world especially should know this is aimed at an audience. This is an international audience. That's what's exciting about it. Netflix expects more people to watch this in India than in any other country because Shira is one of our wrestlers is from India. So it's a platform that I'll be honest with you, I don't think wrestling has had. WWE obviously is a juggernaut, but I'm not sure any wrestling company has had a platform like Netflix is about to give us. And I just think it's exciting.
I love the like official statement on the show, the synopsis. I mean, it's not going to get into the whole thing, but it's a great, like, perfect paragraph. Anybody else wants to check it out, there, like, really kind of tells you what's going to go on. I mean, he talks about you, talks about Al, talks about it used to be this finishing school. I mean, it just seems like they're going the extra mile. I mean, they really put a lot of effort into it. It's not one of those things where they're just going to put it out willy nilly. I mean, they're putting effort into you guys as if they really want you guys to succeed. Like they're pushing this thing, which is great.
Oh, I think they do. I mean, look, I don't know if did you guys watch Last Chance U or Cheer?
I've only seen parts of it. Never seen the whole thing.
I mean, those shows won Emmys right? I mean, those were Emmy-winning documentaries. They're not. This is not. This is. I mean, this is the kind of show that could win awards. Like, I mean, we're having major television critics, not wrestling critics, television critics coming to one of our shows before the show is released because they want to see it in person. I think Netflix, from what I can tell, really believes in it. I think you folks are going to be amazed at the production level. I mean, this is going to be a high production level. And look, the story is this. You mentioned all those great names. Well, the reality is we haven't had anything like that in a long time. And so when we bought the company, our goal was to try to move back to being a place that could develop the top stars. And if the talent level we have now as compared to 3 years ago is night and day. If you had come 3 years, they wouldn't have wanted to do this show 3 years ago. But now it's a different thing. And that's what they want to tell, is the story of people really struggling to make it in their dream. And I think that's what's really exciting about it. And, you know, we have some folks that have, even since the cameras rolled, hit success. Layla Gray is with AEW, but she's still with us. She came through with us. The Outrunners have been with us for on and off, and now they're, you know, having some success on a higher level. So I genuinely think this show is going to lead to a number of our people getting a shot at a higher level.
Lavie, I know you have a bunch of nice questions for Matt. Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so something that I was thinking about when the show was announced, you had mentioned a couple other documentaries, but Formula One was something that was somewhat niche here in the state. Drive to Survive show, has that been something in the back of your mind, the transformative nature of a show like that?
I mean, like Formula One and the PGA Tour show and the tennis show. I mean, I think what I would say is think about how those shows look, and that's how this show is going to look. But we, of course, have. I mean, Formula One is a billion-dollar industry. I mean, we're a company, and you're going to see this in the show, that struggles to make payroll, right? Like we are trying every week to get sponsors to try to be able to make it on a week-to-week basis. And you will see me and the other owners doing our best to come up with the money to make payroll. I mean, those things are real. So I think it'll be the production value of that Formula One show. But imagine you were doing it about a small town wrestling company. You know, now this will give us a platform, but it will be up to us to execute on it, right? I mean, it's going to be up to us to translate the viewers to the documentary, to the viewers to our show. And that's a challenge. And to be quite frank with you, we hope season 2 is them documenting us trying to make this successful based on the platform from season 1, which I think is an interesting sort of meta story unto itself.
I noticed that one of your upcoming tapings, probably not coincidentally timed for the same week, a rebranding, reimagining tied in the attention that you'll get this program.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything to say this, but I want to try something innovative. Okay. So again, I want you to think about the theory of what I see from this show. I mean, Netflix expects there to be millions upon millions of viewers to this show. Okay. These are all people, the vast majority of which will have never heard of OVW, many of which will have never watched wrestling before. So I need to make my show accessible to them. So we're making it free on our website, free on FITE TV. But B, I want them to turn on our show and see the people they watched in the documentary. And in some ways, the world of wrestling in our show needs to be what it looks like in that documentary. The same people, you know, the same so we're going to try to make the conflicts they see in the documentary for them to show up in the show. And that's going to be, I can't say what that is because I haven't even seen the documentary yet. So we said the idea of hard reset was OVW is about to reset. And we're going to get the eyes of a lot of people who've never cared about us to at least give us a shot. And so we need to have that ready. We need to have the people. So, I mean, again, let's use me and Al. I think you're going to see a lot of the show Al and I disagree. I wouldn't be surprised if we decide to make Al and I disagreeing a part of our regular weekly OVW show, because we kind of think, wrestling is all about turning sort of this meta world into reality. Okay, what about turning the reality into this sort of meta world? And I don't think anybody's ever tried to do that, because very few companies have opened their doors like we're about to.
So I'm glad you brought it up with Al Snow, and I think that really stands as a central point to this forthcoming show. Normally, I wouldn't bring it up because it could be awkward between an owner and senior management. But sort of without giving away the show, what is, like? Of course, Al is the veteran. You're the business person and so on. But like, what are some of the issues that you've butted heads on? Has there been creative angles or? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's say what Al and I agree with. Okay, so we both agree that independent wrestling's weakness is it's too much sort of look how athletic I am and not storytelling, right? So Al and I agree on that. Al and I are big on the thing that makes wrestling successful outside of the hardcore fans is storytelling. And a lot of what I see when I watch independent wrestling is who can do the best moves, the craziest moves, and that to me does not sell it the way so Al and I agree on that. Where Al and I would disagree some is Al, I think, doesn't see marketing the way I do. He is wrestling focused, which is good because I think he's got one of the best wrestling minds of all time. Whereas I'm thinking about things like, how do we get a Netflix show? How do I get people who don't care about wrestling to watch? How do I get, people? So a lot of our business model is we go to county fairs and do shows in front of people who don't even know about wrestling. And I had the governor. The governor is gonna. We created a title belt that was the belt of Kentucky, and I got the Kentucky governor to give it away the first time. Those are things that I think are important that Al probably rolls his eyes on a little bit. So you see that sort of fight between this wrestling marketing mentality and me, sort of a broader marketing mentality. And sometimes he's ended up being right, and sometimes I've ended up being right. I think what the show shows is a course of time we both end up respecting each other's view a little bit more than we did maybe when they started filming.
So I think one of the best advocates, as I'm sure you know, for OVW is Mr. Spectacular.
Oh, dude, he never shuts up about it, does he? He's the biggest promoter in the world. I love it.
Yeah, we've even had, he listens to the show and talk about In the Weeds. We've had arguments online, good natured, about how many homes that U2 America gets and so on. So we enjoy talking about television distribution. But in terms of television, so we talked about this a couple of years ago. You're well established now in various markets in Kentucky. I would say that outside of certainly WOW and a championship wrestling presented by CarShield, you're right up there with reality of wrestling, maybe even a little bit ahead of them in terms of pretty wide distribution. But sort of, do you see this show as sort of like that next pivot point to, ideally pitch Netflix on a weekly episodic show? Are you taking meetings?
Well, that's the dream.
Yeah,
that's the dream. But look, that's going to be so. First of all, I love Jesse, and I want our wrestlers to know we have wide potential distribution. But I don't have to tell you guys, there's a difference between potential distribution and people watching, right? Here's what I care about. I got to balance the budget. I got to see, can I sell ads and can I get people to, how many people are actually watching it? So you will see this play out in the documentary. Wrestlers, and I want them to do this. This is what they need to do to be successful. They have to live in a world where they believe everything is the biggest thing in the world. I have to live in the world of how many people are actually watching this thing, right? And how do I get more people to watch this thing? So we can be on 50 channels, but it doesn't matter if nobody's watching those channels, right? So my goal is to get us on channels people watch, right? And my goal is to get us in markets that people watch. So we are watched in Kentucky. We are very well known in Kentucky. But getting outside of Kentucky, you got to hunt us down. Now, many more people watch than when I was here 2 years ago. but still not enough to where we can make the money in order to be what we need to be. So, look, would I love for Netflix to give us a weekly show? Yeah. Do I think that's likely? No. What I think is hopeful is Netflix says, look, there's something here. Maybe we can do 2 specials a year. You know, back in the old days, WWE did 4 a year, right? Maybe we can do 2 a year on Netflix. And if I have 2 specials a year on Netflix, I can go to real TV networks and say, now, why don't you do our weekly show? Because twice a year I get the Netflix platform. That's the goal. And I love Jesse because Jesse is our biggest advocate, and Jesse is known outside of our region. But we have a long way to go. And this is, I mean, look, Monster Factory on Apple TV, which I thought was a good show. But Apple TV is Netflix is in 45 times more homes than Apple TV. Okay. So even if Monster Factory is as popular as it can be, it can only be reached in 1 out of every 45 homes. We get a chance to be on the largest platform in the world. I tell my wrestlers this all the time. More people watched Last Chance U than watched WrestleMania. Okay. Why can't that be us? Like, there's a world in which more people will see this wrestler show than watch WrestleMania. Now, if that happens and I can't make it to where we get a TV deal or make some money out of it, then I'm an idiot. And so my goal is to make that happen. And when we talk a year from now, this company is in a different place because this is our one chance. I mean, this is our chance and we got to seize it and take advantage of it.
So reflecting back on the last couple of years, there was, some local articles that I came across, sort of like you were looking to move outside of Davis Arena to purchase, I think it was potentially from a college, like a new center, and maybe the realities of, what's viable and not, hit in terms of balancing the budget and planning. So sort of like what ambitions seem like maybe it was a little bit too much right now, and also what things might have surprised you in a positive way that have worked out really well.
Yeah, so we thought about buying a building from the University of Louisville, a gym. We wanted to move. I mean, Davis Arena is very small. You'll see a lot of it in the show. But then we just realized financially it wasn't a viable solution. I mean, it was, we now draw significantly better than we did 2 years ago. We fill our building quite a bit. But at the same time, as you'll see on the show, the company loses money, and a lot of money. So it wouldn't have made sense to start losing more money. Well, the reason that is we try to do something nobody else does. I mean, you probably know this better than I do. But is there any company besides WWE and AEW that runs weekly live television but us? I mean, I don't think so.
And not at that level, like at a smaller level, like Rocky Mountain Pro, and which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. GCW runs all the time, but not episodic weekly programming.
But not episodic and not live and not full-time staff. And so we have a huge overhead that honestly most wrestling companies don't. And the reason they don't is it's very hard to make money. But that's why we can get some talent. I mean, look, we've got some people that that work our shows to learn to be on television because they can't do that everywhere else in a weekly basis. And so I think it's a selling point, but we've got to learn to make money. And the only way we're going to make money from it is to get a regular TV deal on a national TV distribution platform that pays us money for it. It's one thing. There are a lot of networks that'll put you on for free, but I need somebody to pay me to put us on. And that's the chance for this to happen. And until we have that, a new building really doesn't make sense. Now, what has worked out well is the foothold we've gained in Kentucky. My goal was to make it to where everyone in Kentucky knew who we were. And now we can go pretty much anywhere in Kentucky, and with enough publicity can draw really, really well. But again, I'm really not in this business to do high school gyms with 120 people. I got into this because I think if we do this correctly, we can be the 3rd or 4th biggest company in the country. the vision for that was, I got to get a break. And I think this Netflix show is the break. I really do. Now, whether it is or not, we'll have to wait and see. But I go back to what I said. I mean, as amazing as AEW is, and I have a ton of respect for them, they're really a non-presence outside of America and England. Then Netflix is everywhere. Netflix is everywhere. It's all over the world. They are translating this show into 47 different languages. There has to be a way to take advantage of that. And that, as a business person, is what my goal is to do.
So, in terms of talking about existing channels, certainly your relationship with Mike Weber and FITE has been continuous for a number of years, but different promotions are approaching in different ways. Like I mentioned, GCW seems to really, with the FITE Plus, seems to have found the formula that works for them on their level, very different style of wrestling. Whereas an NWA, they still run their pay-per-views there, sort of stepped away. And MLW sort of has its a commitment monthly, but they're not, running a number of shows through there. Sort of like, what do you make of how things are working for you right now on FITE? And do you think there's potential different approaches?
We're very blessed to have a platform like FITE because it allows anyone to want to watch us, right? But I don't know what FITE's deal is with these other companies, but FITE is basically a revenue sharing platform. It's not a rights fee platform, at least with us. Maybe it is for some of the, like GCW, that draws large. I mean, we can do pay-per-views on there and make money, and we've done that. But to be quite frank with you, the revenue is not enough that it justifies not having it to where I let everybody view our product. So for me and for our company, we have to have a bigger goal. I mean, we have to try to do, I want to be the third company with a regular weekly TV deal on a major carrier that will pay us for it. Right now, WWE and AEW are really the only ones that have that. I mean, I know there are versions of that for NWA and Impact, but it's not weekly, it's not live, it's not the things we want to do. And so that's what our goal is. Now, will that happen? I don't know. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to do. We were very close to a deal 2 years ago. But to be honest with you, had we done it, I'm not sure we had the production ability that we have now. And this is a chance to sort of set that up. So, that's from a business standpoint, that's where we're headed. Now, from a wrestling standpoint, you asked about Al and I disagreeing. I don't really tell Al what to do in the wrestling. I tried to do that at first, and then I realized I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. Fans think they know one thing. It's another thing when you're actually doing it. And so I had to learn what I didn't know. So I kind of leave most of that to Al. He's great at it. But I do think the way independent wrestling is done financially, I really respect how GCW's done it. It's a different style of wrestling, but they've been financially successful. But that's not our path. And so our path, we have to make work. And hopefully this platform is the step to do that. We have a lot of people waiting. I mean, bottom line is, here's what it comes down to. We get a season 2, I think we'll have a TV deal within a couple months. If we don't, we probably won't. And so it comes down to hoping people watch that Netflix show. And if it does, this company in 6 months can look like a completely different place.
So just a couple questions on different tangents. I'm just curious, as certainly he's established himself, but also gets a lot of attention. Have you ever picked up the phone and called Jim Cornette and said, "Hey, you want to come down and get involved?"
We've tried. We've tried many times. I've never met Jim Cornette. I have no interaction with him. I know Al knows him, and I think Al likes him. Pretty much no one associated with OVW nowadays except Al knows Jim. Jim lives in Louisville. Jim and I think, have a similar political mindset. I would love to have Jim involved. I think it's unfair to tell the history of OVW and not have Jim Cornette in it. We're going to do an OVW Hall of Fame, and we're going to have an inaugural class. And I don't think I'm spoiling anything to say Jim Cornette's certainly going to be in it. And I'd love for him to be a part of it. He has, from what I understand, some animosity and bitterness towards OVW, but the thing is, everybody has that bitterness too. None of them are there. So the people that are here now, we would all love to see Jim be part of it. And if Jim ever hears this, we'd love to have you. I know Jim kind of, I don't listen to his podcast, but I hear that he will say negative things about OVW. And I hate that because we don't feel that way about him. So I would love nothing more than when Netflix is here and when people are here. I'd love to have Jim Cornette in the building. The thing wouldn't exist without him. He is a brilliant wrestling mind. I know Al has a ton of respect for him. And so I'd love to have that happen, but he has to be willing to do it. And I've just gotten the sense, I've never talked to him, but I've gotten the sense that he has a lot of sort of bitterness towards OVW. But my reaction would be, none of those people are here anymore. Like, the only person here is Al, and you like Al, so why not try to do it?
Yeah, it reminds me of that story from years ago where New Japan hated Impact Wrestling. They were like, basically the idea was like FTNA, because New Japan sent their rising stars who became, the Tanahashi and so on, who became the huge stars, and they treated them, terribly. But Jeff Jarrett had been gone for years, but that perception remained. So that's something, something to think about. I'm friends with the great Brian Last, so maybe I can help put in the good word.
If you could pave that way, we would love it. I have really advocated towards trying to make that happen for a long time because, I grew up watching Jim, and when I got involved with OVW and learned a lot more about its history, there's a couple people that really matter. And I'll be interested to see how Jim handles this when it comes out. I mean, when the trailer came out, every wrestling fan online was tagging Jim Cornette and going, "What do you think? What do you think?" So at some point he's going to have to respond to it. I hope he takes it as a positive, because I've not heard one person say a negative word about Jim Cornette that's in OVW now. Most people, if he walked in the door, probably people would greet him with like awe, including me. So I would love to see him here. He's just down the street. He literally lives 2 miles from us. So hopefully we could make it happen.
So just a grassroots question from me. I don't know if it's considered competition or rising tides raise all ships and something like that. Derby City Wrestling has entered your territory. They have television. They have the United Wrestling behind them. Dave Marquez, who has years of experience. Have you noticed them? Have you watched the show? Any thoughts?
I have not watched the show. I know Gilbert Corsi, who's involved, has been a friend of mine over the years. I wish them the best. I respectfully, I don't really think what they're doing. Like, we have a different goal than them, right? So their goal is to do sort of local and regional programming. We have a show premiering in 3 weeks on Netflix. So I don't consider, they're doing one show a month. I think we do shows every week. So I don't really honestly consider it competition. I agree with you with the rising tide theory. So we have some wrestlers who are with us that now do stuff with them, and I wish them the best. I mean, Dustin Jackson was with us and does stuff with them, and I'm proud of him and all the people that have been with us. Look, I didn't come from the wrestling world. I came from the sports world. And in the sports media world, if I work at ESPN and somebody works at Fox Sports, it never makes sense for us to hate each other. Why in the world would we do that, right? Like, who cares? We're just working in different places. So I feel the exact same way about wrestling. I know there's a lot of that happens, especially amongst promoters. No, I don't feel any of that, in part because I don't know any of these people. The only people I know in wrestling are the people that have walked through that door of Davis Arena. I don't know anybody else. I don't know anybody in the WWE. I've talked some with Tony Khan. So I do know Tony Khan a little bit, but I don't know anybody. I don't know Billy Corgan. I don't know anybody in TNA. I don't know anybody. So, like, how can I dislike people I don't know? So I know Gilbert Corsi, but I don't know one other person involved with Derby City Wrestling or any of those things. So I wish them all success. But I mean this respectfully. my goal right now is this show debuts on Netflix. I want it to be the #1 documentary Netflix has in the month of September. We had more views for our trailer than any trailer that they've released in the last 3 weeks. That's what I consider my competition, is trying to make a national, interesting television product and not whatever's happening in the wrestling world.
So this is fascinating, and I had said last question from me before I turn over to John, but I do have one more question. I believe it's Richard Schaefer who came over to Anthem recently, and one of the things that they spoke about was making acquisitions in pro wrestling, and John and I have talked about it. And really, the only one that would make sense to us would be for Impact to establish themselves with somebody, or specifically with OVW, sort of to have that system in place so that they can grow together. So the question is, would something like that make sense to you? And generally, as a business person, are you open for business? Like, did you invest
I
now?
mean, it would.
Mhm.
Of course, it would make sense. I mean, if I were WWE's in a different situation because they have NXT, although I still think NXT leaves a gap for them. They still are trying to, now NXT is so big that the step that OVW gives you, which is a chance to learn and fail on television, they're not even really able to do that now because 700,000 people are watching NXT, so they better not screw up, right? But I think something AEW is missing, and I've talked with Tony about this many times, and we've had these conversations, is when OVW was in its heyday, I mean, I wish I could show you the old tapes of John Cena, Brock Lesnar, and those guys when they started. You see the highlights, but unless you lived it, and I didn't live it, but I've watched the tapes a lot. I mean, they were looking bad sometimes, but they needed to do that. And the crowd reacted when they were bad, but they didn't hate them. They knew they were starting. You know what I mean? And they had the ability to mess up. And they had the ability to mess up without being mocked mercilessly, like happens to a lot of young wrestlers now. So I think for whether it be for AEW, WWE, Impact, whatever, the idea of having a territory where people can get over locally, because the wrestlers that we have at OVW are big in Kentucky. They can go anywhere in Kentucky and people know who Cash Flow is. They know who Luscious Lawrence is. They know who these people are. That is happening in Kentucky, and I think there's value to that for the big companies. Throw in the fact that now, we have this Netflix thing. I would certainly love, I mean, we had conversations with, we have a little relationship with Impact. I mean, that's how Shira is with us and a couple other people, but it's not consistent. But if I were one of those companies, I think there'd be a lot of value in having it for the reason that great class that everybody points to the 2002 OVW class, but there were people for the next 9 years that came through here that are wrestlers now, Miz, CM Punk, Cody, all those guys, they came through here and they learned how to sell and how to be TV presences here. And I think there's definitely still value in that in OVW. And again, because we're the only show that does live weekly television, if I'm one of those companies, I would want to do that.
So just to be pointed, so of course you would establish the relationship, but are you open for business, meaning that for the right offer, would you sell, or you got in this to grow it, in terms of a number of years and sort of take it from there?
I mean, would we? That's a tough question. I mean, I think anybody would sell if the offer's right? I mean, every company's been sold multiple times. So, but no, I mean, to be honest with you guys, I got in this for what's happening here in 3 or 4 weeks. When you and I talked 2 years ago, I had a vision. I think when we talked 2 years ago, literally, I think I had just done the pitch meeting to BBC and I couldn't tell you guys that. I think I had done it that week, maybe. And I always had a vision for this. From the beginning, my vision was, I'm going to use my connections in the sports world and in the entertainment world, and I'm going to find a way to get OVW a platform. I thought getting a TV deal would be easier than it was. But then this documentary idea came about, and we're 3 weeks away from seeing that vision become reality 2 years later. So I'm not selling anything for the next 3 weeks. I want to see what happens. I mean, I've waited for this moment for a long time. I think this show's going to be huge. I think the wrestling world, I hope they get behind it. I think if they open their minds to it, they will like it. But I think it's going to be big. I think, I've seen the numbers for what Last Chance U did. I've seen the numbers for what Cheer did. This is his next show. If we do half of what those shows did, it'll be the most watched wrestling show ever in the United States. So if we can't do something with that, then I need to sell it because I'm an idiot.
No, this is awesome. Appreciate all of your candor tonight. John?
So obviously they always say, hey, OVW finishing school, stuff like that. Do you want to be number 3 or finishing school and getting these guys ready and getting them TV experience and having them move up is the goal? Like, where do you see yourself in the marketplace?
Both. I want to be number 3, but also I fully understand why our wrestlers would want to be in the WWE and AEW. I genuinely believe we can be number 3. I don't think we can do it tomorrow, but I genuinely think we can. I would be naive to think we could be 1 or 2. I'm not saying like theoretically in a decade, who the hell knows, right? But in the short term, no. But I think we can be number 3. And if you're number 3, but I still think it would be, if I'm being honest with you, number 3 with a gap to 1 and 2. We don't have Tony Khan's money, and we're not a publicly traded corporation like WWE that's worldwide. So if our wrestlers want to go to those places, I want them to, because my view is if Haley J and Cash Flow and Shira become stars from this show, you know what that means? There's a whole host of wrestlers that want to be in season 2 and want to be in season 3. And I'm for it. It would be very selfish of me for me not to want these people to reach their dream. I think part of it, guys, is my career is not wrestling based. I'm a sports radio host. I own a restaurant. I do other things. This is a part of my life. It's not all of my life. And so these people who it's all of their lives, I want them to reach their dreams. And if we can be a vessel to have that happen, as long as we can break even and not keep losing money like you'll see in this show, I'm for it happening.
I love it. So give us one last big push for the Netflix documentary and where everybody can find OVW every week.
So Wrestlers comes on Netflix September 13th. You will be hearing a ton about it. You'll probably be pounded over the head with it. My sort of hope is, this is what I would say to the wrestling world. Whether you think OVW deserves it, whether you think this should have been GCW, MLW, I don't care. Whatever your wrestling world of choice is. This is a big moment for wrestling. When Cheer came out, there are stories that cheerleading academies saw enrollment double all across the country when Cheer came out. This can be that moment for wrestling. Whether you care about OVW or not, this can be a big moment for wrestling. There are going to be people that watch this show that have never watched wrestling in their entire life. Netflix is about to put the biggest promotional push that any company outside of Vince McMahon in the 80s and Ted Turner in the 90s has ever put behind wrestling. Let's all take advantage of it. And I hope the wrestling world they'll get behind it and not worry about whether or not this or that person should have been on it, and just say, okay, how do we all take this platform and move? Because I think it's going to be great. I had nothing to do with making it, so I don't feel arrogant in saying it. The dude that's making this is one of the best filmmakers in the world. Watch it. The Wrestler many years ago was a fictional movie, but got nominated for an Oscar. I think this show has a chance to get nominated for an Emmy, and I hope people will check it out. I think it's going to be a really big thing for the industry as a whole, and hopefully for OVW.
And where can everybody watch you and follow you online?
FITE TV on Saturday, September 9th. we are putting on a show that's kind of a wrap up of everything we've done. And then every Thursday night at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock on FITE TV, we air. And I hope people will check it out even after it comes out on the 13th. We have some huge surprises. A lot of names that haven't been OVW in many, many years are going to show their face in September, October, November. And I think it's going to be a cool thing to watch.
All right. Awesome. Matt, thank you so much again for all the time. Really appreciate it.
Anytime, guys. You were the first wrestling podcast that ever had me on. So
Yes.
if anytime you want, I'll be glad to do it.
All
Thank
right.
you
Awesome.
so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Matt. Have a great night. All right, Lavie. I guess we got pretty much a full episode here. There might be maybe too many notes to kind of go forward, given the time of night here. But
Yeah, if you'd like to, if you're listening, you'd like to sponsor us for a second episode every week, feel free to reach out to John or I. Our DMs and emails are open.
yes, absolutely. But let's hit the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com. Lavie, what do you got?
Check me out on Twitter, Lavie Marg, LAVIE MARG. Check out my long form articles on linecubjobsearch.com and check out our ever growing LinkedIn group, the Business of the Business Pro Wrestling Industry. Pretty unique group on LinkedIn.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.